All right, you've landed on the Make It Happen podcast. We're going to talk about home inspections, construction defects. Today we're going into, with William, balconies, failed balconies, construction defects with balconies, and new laws in the state of California. Hit the like if you like our content. Make sure you do subscribe so you can see future videos and shorts and all kinds of good content that we're making for you. And thanks for joining us. And so let's get started, William. What do you got for us today?
So today, I thought we'd get started with some of the new legislature that has come into California.
Some of the new legislature?
Yeah, that's a mouthful, but yeah.
Some of the new legislation.
Yeah.
All right, cool. The California legislature has, I don't know that it's that new. I guess it is. This is pretty new law. It's getting ready to take effect and affect a lot of investors who own triplexes and up, right? Apartment buildings and HOAs that own condominiums.
Yep, definitely. And I've even been in condominiums where they're already taking this law into effect, getting ready for it.
Okay.
So the two laws we're going to be talking about here today are the SB 721 and SB 326 laws.
And these are specific to the state of California, which, they're actually pretty good with this regulation and what they're trying to do with inspections on decks and balconies. So I'm pretty bullish that there's going to be a lot of other states that follow. Would you agree? I think that's going to happen.
I would be. For the most part, the feedback that I get is that it's a stark response to what happened, and it's kind of an overkill response. But based on what I've seen with homeowners and inspections that I've done, balconies and decks are really something that gets neglected and a lot of times is not permitted and done incorrectly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, we inspect thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of decks, balconies, patio covers, things that are fastened to the exterior wall with a ledger board, right? And are part of the structure, and they fail. And most of the time they're not done correctly. And so I'm kind of glad that they're doing this. I don't know that this is the best way to have them inspected and force, expenses on landlords. I mean, they're probably going to raise the rents to cover the costs, which is going to affect people. But I am glad that they're really starting to bear down on these attachments to the home.
Yeah, no, me too as well. So I guess the first law to go over is the SB 721. I think this is going to affect a lot more people than SB 326 because SB 721 affects the landlords of buildings that have 3 or more residential units.
Yeah, so this is mostly for apartments. I've never looked up that stat, whether there's more condos or apartments, but condominiums, pay HOA fees. Tenants in apartment buildings pay rent.
Yes.
So, which is essentially the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I've been inspecting a ton of fourplexes and triplexes and even multi-units or more units a lot lately. And pretty much almost every one, they don't know about this law yet. And this law is going to be taking effect in January 1st, 2025. That's when they're required to have their first balcony inspection done.
Well, the law is in effect now, but the deadline is January 1st next year.
Yes.
2025.
Yes.
Okay.
And even the seller and the buyer side, they don't know about this law. They don't know when the deadline is.
Yeah.
They don't know what it looks like. And it's kind of shocking. So I think towards the end of the year, we're going to be getting a lot of phone calls of people trying to meet the deadline last minute.
Yeah, we haven't decided whether or not we're going to get involved with these decks and balconies inspections or not. We might not. But we'll talk more about that later.
But yeah, as far as the inspection goes, now this inspection is going to essentially require an inspector, whether it's an architect, an engineer, or licensed contractor,
right?
To come out, inspect first and foremost the structural integrity of these balconies, and then the flashings and the waterproofings and other elements that go on these.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So you're hearing us talk about a new law that's taken effect. There's actually two of them. He's starting with SB 751, which is for 3 units and up, so apartment buildings. Let's step back though. Why is this law taking effect? What happened? Right? Somebody died, essentially. And so talk to us about, and this was in Berkeley, California. This was a long time ago, actually. So show us some pictures of that, William.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So taking a step back to
There
Berkeley,
it is. That's
California,
the famous balcony that failed.
and I believe 6 died and 7 were injured.
6 died, 7 were injured. So tell us what happened there. It was just construction defect, right?
So
It wasn't built right.
based on what I was reading, there was a party going on in this apartment.
Okay.
They had a bunch of people on the deck, and the builder who built this building, from what I was reading, lost his construction license because what caused his deck to fail was, one, they used lumber that was cheaper than what they said they were going to use in the plans.
Right. Well, cheaper and doesn't have the same strength.
Yes.
Like, so if you don't know, there's certain types of woods that are stronger than others. And when you build a home, or especially decks and balconies, you're required to use like a stronger kind of wood. Not necessarily, you don't have to use oak or something, like a walnut, but there are grades to the wood that you're supposed to use.
Yeah, some woods are softer than others.
Yeah, some are softer than others. Some shouldn't be used for this particular.
But even if that was the case, you might be able to get away with it. What actually caused this deck to fail was that the subcontractor who was supposed to waterproof the deck failed to do so.
So the membrane and the waterproofing and the essentially was allowing water to get in.
Yes.
And it wasn't waterproofed. And so if you get too much water into a box deck, it can deteriorate the wood on the interior side.
Yes, exactly. And essentially, if it's boxed, the wood holds the moisture. There's no ventilation, so the wood rots out, and then essentially,
so we got to be careful. You don't have a license, so there are sticklers here in the state of California. I have a branch through your license, so I can tell you, wood doesn't rot out if it's just wet. It can weaken it. But what you really don't want getting in there is there's like a fungus. So if there's moisture in there, it's dark, and a fungus gets in there, the fungus rots or eats the wood, and then the wood's weakened and it can fail.
Yes, correct. Also, in response to these 2 laws, they also passed a new building standard in 2018. Originally, when these decks were built, they didn't want them ventilated at all in case there was a fire.
Right.
That way, since there's no ventilation, now there's a firewall, essentially, not necessarily, but prevents the spread of the fire to the balcony for egress.
It's closed off, and so that's the thought process there, but that changed.
Yep, that changed here in 2018 to prevent this from happening.
So what do they want now, William?
Now, I believe every 150 square feet of enclosed deck framing, they want 1 soffit vent at the underside for air ventilation.
So essentially, they want these boxed vents or these boxed decks and balconies just to be ventilated. So if moisture does get in there, it can dry out.
Yes.
Yeah, so it makes sense, right?
Yes.
And
I call that out on almost every inspection now.
There's like, because they didn't allow it before, now we have, I
guess the likelihood of moisture getting into the framing is a lot higher than a fire.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the deal. I've sealed my fence in my backyard every 2 or 3 years with like a clear coat sealer, and the sun hits it doesn't last. And so, how many people do you know that actually reseal their decks every 3 to 5 years? They don't, right? And so there's a lot of moisture getting into this stuff.
Yeah, homeowners like to delay and procrastinate costs. I guess
costs money. So. Well, so here we're looking at this here. You can just see that thing. It's just that door. So at the top part of the photo there, you can see the white French doors. That used to be a walkway, and it's just gone. And so show me. Do you have the other picture, William, where it just totally flipped? Because what happened is when it went down, it literally just totally flipped over.
I do not have that photo.
You don't have that photo?
But
okay.
I think I have another one that will satisfy you.
All right. So.
Okay. But yeah, this happened, and lawmakers are doing their best to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's changing things. So, okay. All right. So we're going to talk to you a lot about how this affects other people that are, this one actually caused lawmakers to make a change in at least the state of California in maintenance on decks and balconies. So they have to be inspected now by an architect, engineer, or contractor, or even home inspector on a regular basis. What's the period? Is it for every 4 years?
You have to have one inspection done every 6 years.
For apartments.
And then the homeowner is required, no, this is for units 3 or more as well.
Okay.
So every 6 years, you're supposed to have an inspection. And the homeowner or landlord is required to keep at least 2 inspection cycle reports on hand and transfer them during the event of a sale as well.
And if that inspection finds that there's faults, guess what? They have what, like 60 or 90 days to fix it?
Yep.
Or there's fines, right? And so, all right, let's move on. So that's why we're talking about all this. This is what happened. Which is shocking it's taken this long, because this is InterNACHI reports that there's thousands and thousands of failures and has been happening for like 50 years. So let's move forward, William. All right, there you go.
So this is another one. I think, is this what you meant by flipped over? This is another type of failure?
This one just dropped down, right? So if you're standing underneath, you got probably pretty mortally injured.
Yep.
What that Berkeley one did is it literally like hinged whoop, like that. So they went out like down to the ground. I don't know how many stories up that was, but that's why they died.
So based on what I see in most of the decks and balconies that I inspect, I believe this would be probably the most common type of failure.
Right. It's the attachment. So that Berkeley one, the framing members just snapped.
Yes.
This one is at the attachment, which is the ledger board, where the ledger board just came away from the building.
Yes, and probably the most common defect that I see is an incorrectly fastened ledger board.
Right. There's specific code on how they have to be fastened to the home. There's like 2 inches from the top, 2 inch or an inch from the bottom. Then you got to have staggered bolts. They have to be a minimum certain size. You can't use nails. They have to have washers on them.
They have to be embedded into the wall.
And here's a big one. That ledger board has to be flashed.
Yes.
Right, you're right. It has to be embedded into the wall. So a lot of these stucco homes, people move in and say, "Oh, let's just slap a board on the wall, bolt it in, and we're good."
Yeah.
And you can't do that. You have to actually cut out the stucco, flash it so moisture can't get in behind there. And it can't just be, I've seen them put them just on anywhere on the wall. These things have to be fastened on the wall to the header above the door. So in between each floor, there's like a header. It's like a beam. It has to be into the beam. It can't just be like haphazardly into the wall where they're just studs. Otherwise, you're not bolting anything.
Yeah, definitely. This was a photo that I just took off of Google Images.
Okay.
So this
so that's right online. Anybody can find that.
Yeah.
Imagine standing underneath that when that thing came down. Yeah. I mean, that would hurt.
Yeah, it would. So this is one I see very commonly.
Yep. A lot of people have that. A lot of people all over the United States have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You would think that, oh my gosh, those posts are what's holding it up. That's what's going to make it fail. Actually, that part probably isn't all that bad, right? I mean,
I think it's a little undersized, but I think it's going to fail at the attachment to the home.
Right.
Like you said.
Well, that's where 90% of them fail, right?
Yeah.
Is where it attaches to the home. Well, see, the nice thing with this one, though, is it's not boxed in. The underside isn't closed up.
Yep.
Right? So if moisture gets in there, it'll just dry out. Oh yeah.
Well,
they have footings and they have positive reinforcements on them.
So most likely, what would happen, I think, with these posts is they would just start to lean and
deflect,
the beam would twist or bow. And
I
would know if it was going to fail.
I would like to see a 2x6 there, not a 4x4.
Yeah.
Or I mean a 4x6, not a 2x6, a 4x6. I mean, if it's a 2x6, you could
maybe even
sandwich them.
A better footing too.
Yeah, a bigger footing would be nice, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, go back a little bit. So one of the things that it's not good about this is look how close that wood is going all the way down to the concrete. So if you're just sitting there hosing off, I mean, the bottom of those things, they deteriorate. We find those things kind of rotted out too, right?
Yep.
All the time.
I like to poke the bottom of those posts with my screwdriver all the time.
You got a male dog in the backyard. I mean, they lift a leg, they pee on them. I mean, those things you don't want water on them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of weight bearing down onto those 3 posts.
Yeah, especially it looks like we have a drain right here in the back. So it looks like all the water sloped to go through the post.
Yeah.
And then down the drain and then probably drain to the front of the home.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay.
So this was a home that I inspected, built in 2015.
Oh, this is a great catch, William. Great catch. Man,
so
most home inspectors will probably blow right by that.
So yeah, one thing I'm making note of is it looks like moisture's hugging the balcony here at the corner and then just draining to the wall cladding here to the left. There's no ventilation on this cantilevered balcony,
right?
Which this home was built 3 years before they made the change.
Right.
To the
So
standard.
it's just a boxed balcony.
Yep.
You got to make sure that thing's sealed.
Yeah. And it looks like there was some cracking and staining already, even though this balcony is only 9 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can see as the water's kind of hugging the bottom part of the balcony from the corners there, it is getting underneath, and some of that may be staying inside.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So,
because water does wick up. People don't realize that. If you're hitting the bottom of something, water can wick up into it.
Yeah. So here's a deck that I inspected over here in Palos Verdes not too long ago. And they just stacked, what they did was they just stacked these railroad ties, framed the deck into the foundation, and put turf on top.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it is pressure treated at least, but gosh, you're not supposed to use railroad ties over 3 feet high.
No.
So wow, okay.
Yeah, and you can see it's starting to leaning.
And
I don't think they really dug too deep into the hillside here. And
no.
So whenever we look at decks, we like to look at footings, posts, the entire deck framing essentially. And right here, what we were looking at was the footings starting to settle a little bit because I don't think they installed the post originally as floating.
Okay.
And then this is like what you're talking about here.
Yeah, see the dirt just covering the post. I mean, that post is gonna stay wet, and there is
It's going to deteriorate.
You got plants in the ground there, right? And they're gonna start trying to attach to it and deteriorate. Oh, there's a ledger board right there. Look at that. Okay, you're under the house there, right?
Yeah. Wasn't really too happy with how they fastened it to the foundation.
Okay.
I mean, it's not exposed to the weather elements, but still, when you fasten ledger boards and you bolt in a straight line, you actually compromise the structural integrity of the ledger board because now it's weak here.
Right, because it can flex.
Yeah.
Right. That's why you want the bolts staggered.
Yeah. No, I've seen these boards snapped and completely in half.
I bet you have.
So another deck. This was actually the deck with the settled footing.
Okay.
And you can see it's starting to sag here at the rear.
It's just kind of floating out there.
This was actually the turf on the the railroad ties that I was also mentioning. I was really happy that the client here was a structural engineer.
Oh, was he? Yeah, so it was easy to explain what's happening.
Yeah, and he probably didn't even need me to.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So
he just brought it to his attention. He'd probably look at it and be like, I'm cool.
Yeah.
Or not.
But yeah, they had a whole lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so here we go. I know where that is.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. We didn't sign an NDA, but this is a famous person's home.
Yep.
So, okay. Very famous. Of all time.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all we'll go. All right, so this is a balcony on one side of the home. There's a couple things going on here. First of all, those railings are old school. They got to be higher now, right?
Yes.
But look at that. I mean, they just...
Wasn't this home from the 1890s?
I can't remember. Yeah, it's one of the older homes in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But I mean, moisture is going to get in there. I mean, that's mortar, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It doesn't even look like there's a sealer on it.
No.
I don't think they're sealing it at all. So, yeah, that's a condition that would be concerning.
And I hope we don't know what the framing members look like underneath this, but
Oh.
that's a lot of weight right
Yeah.
there with all this stone.
It's heavy
and,
for sure.
and then you're just having tea and
Yep.
you got what, 2 feet of
Just gotta
railing
make sure
to
you don't
protect
fall
from
off
all-
that sucker.
Yeah. And this was the type of home where you have kind of like butlers and servants and
Right, there's a lot of people walking
if
around.
you're living around here, they're bringing you your brunch on this balcony. And,
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't think this is the safest balcony to be really walking around.
Not to today's standards, for
No.
sure.
Okay. So yeah, another thing, we're just looking at all the railings here.
Yeah,
Typically,
looks like 60s railing there.
yeah, 60s railing. Actually, here in California, we're the only state in the country where barrier railings have to be
40.
more than 36 inches.
42 inches in California, right?
Yep. So
40 or 42? 42.
42.
Yep.
And so we mentioned the incorrect height. We mentioned when these balusters here in the middle
Are wider than 4 inches.
wider than 4 inches, and it's a great view though.
Yeah, well, it's more open, you can see, but you don't really need to see through that, I don't think. But if you were sitting down, I guess you could see the ocean through the balusters.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are a little wide. I'd say those are more than 4 inches,
Yeah, these are more than 4 inches.
but definitely 42 inches high.
So I thought this was a really nice sealer that they put on this deck.
Yeah, so there you go. That's how a deck and bar balcony should be sealed and maintained, for sure.
I don't know if you noticed there's a cemetery in the back of this one.
Oh, wow. You would point that out.
All right. And then this was another balcony that I saw yesterday that
Okay.
I wanted to mention. So now these type of railings were thrown in the code as unacceptable for a few years,
Yep,
and they quickly changed it back.
yep.
So we consider railings like this as scalable because kids like to climb up them like they're ladders sometimes.
Well, they can, right?
Yeah.
And so is home inspectors. City inspectors have no liability. You can't sue a city inspector,
Correct.
right? But private home inspectors, when somebody's buying a home, we do have liability. And part of the standards for home inspectors is to tell people whether a condition's safe or not. Well,
Well, yeah, because we follow the business and professions code.
in our state, but
Yeah.
in any state, or anywhere internationally, any home inspector, when they're inspecting something and they see something that potentially could be a safety issue, the onus is on them. That's what they need to say something about it. You see it, you need to say something about it. It's irresponsible and unethical not to. So even though this is to code, we still have to mention that it's a potential safety issue.
Yes.
What do you think about the sealer on this one?
I actually ended up recommending a contractor.
Why?
As you can see here, there's been water sitting in this
So
one spot.
inadequate drainage.
So inadequate drainage. You can see it's starting to wear a little bit.
Okay.
When you have water that sits in one spot here on a deck, you can see it's all stained and going back towards the wall.
Yeah, yep.
This was a cantilever deck with no ventilation at the underside of it.
Okay. So you think water's just getting in there probably?
I don't think necessarily it was that worn out to where water's getting in there, but if this condition goes unchecked for a period of time, it's eventually going to start to really wear on that sealer a lot faster than it's intended to.
Okay.
So yeah, I did recommend a contractor on this one.
Well, they're going to have it inspected January 1st. So,
Yeah.
just to kind of stop on that, one of the interesting things about inspecting these, how do you really know how do you really know? There's no standards on how they're inspected. there's nothing out right now on how you have to inspect these. And so I think that is a standard that needs to be written. They didn't do that when they put this bill into effect, but there does need to be some sort of standard for us to follow, because really to verify whether it really has been affected by moisture or moisture's getting in there, you got to cut a hole. If it's a box deck and there's no vent, you can't see in there. You got to cut a hole. And so that's the only way.
Well, yeah, I think whoever does these inspections, at least in my opinion, should be installing these vents that are missing.
And there you go. Cut a hole, put a vent.
Cut a hole, put a vent, look at the framing.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, but yeah, you're just completely relying on the integrity of whoever's inspecting your decks at this point. You're completely right.
There's no standard.
It's like I do insurance inspections, and there's no standard for my insurance inspection. It's all based on
your opinion,
on my opinion and what I think. And just yesterday, I had somebody asking me to not take certain pictures, and
it's like you can't
and don't say anything about my roof, so that or the insurance company is not going to renew me. And I'm like,
well, you can't do that. You got to maintain ethics and integrity.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I have to give an age and the current condition. I'm like, sorry, your roof is 30 years old.
You say, you know what, you need to replace it.
Yeah.
Put a new one on.
Everything else looks good. Get a roofer though.
Yeah. All right. So what I got? How many more you got?
This is it.
All right, that's the last one.
Yeah.
Do you can you pull up a diagram on the ledger board? See if you can pull up a diagram on how a ledger board has to be fastened. Just real quick, Google it. I think this is a great topic, but William, these photos are fantastic. If you have a deck, patio cover, or a balcony on your house, and you can see the attachment underneath it, William's going to pull up the diagram. I don't know why you're in home gauge. Can you just pull up the diagram off Google, William?
I thought we had it in our
Please,
report.
just all right. So, I want you to look at this diagram and see if your ledger board looks similar to this diagram. Can you see bolts going through the ledger board, and are they staggered? So this is a great picture William just pulled up. This is an Internachi photo from their site, and you can see how the bolts they're on the top part of the board and on the bottom part of the board, and they're essentially in a stagger. The bolts have to be 5 inches from the end, a minimum of 2 inches from the bottom, and 2 inches from the top. So you don't want to see a bolt all the way at the top or all the way at the bottom. And there's more code as far as how they're supposed to be spaced. But in general sense, you should see this kind of a pattern with your bolts. And so check them, you can do this on your own. So we'd encourage you to do that.
Yep.
All right. Hey, thank you, William. Appreciate you pulling that up. All right. So please hit the like, subscribe, pound the notifications button so we can get you all of our shorts. And whenever we do upload our next podcast, you can see it and watch it and support us. We appreciate that. Leave some comments too. This is a fun topic, and we'll definitely answer every single comment that's left. William, until next time, are we going to do roofs?
Yeah, we're going to do roof next.
All right, right.
I've seen some messed up roofs.
All right. Well, we had a pretty long winter here, and a lot of people had weather these last couple of years. So, all right, make it happen.